clips, which you're going to see take place, which are about all that we know factually about what happened here. And we'll start off with 10 or 12 minutes of CNN and other clips from smartphones. And then we'll go to the panel with a set of questions. I have a set of questions that surprisingly long set of questions and difficult set of questions for the panel. We're not going to give them too long because at about 12:30, we'd like to turn to you people for questions to anyone at the panel. All right, here we go. I'm Phil Heymann, Professor Philip Heymann. You know Andrew Crespo, Carol Steiker, Alex Whiting, and Ron Sullivan, my colleagues. Difficult case, difficult question. Let's begin by taking a look at what the facts are. As we know, there may be more facts that we don't know.
New video shows Freddie Gray minutes after his initial arrest. The last time he was seen publicly and alive. The video is short, but it shows Gray not moving, lying half in, half out of the police van.
He wasn't responding. He was like this. And they picked him up and threw him up in the paddy wagon.
This is the corner of Baker and Mount Street. This is a block from where Freddie Gray was arrested. He was arrested just around the corner, down at the end of this block. This is where police pulled him out of the van, they say, to shackle his feet. There was a woman watching everything right across the street. He was unconscious to you?
Yes. That's when I asked them, could they get him a paramedic? They told me to mind my business. I said, it is my business.
Baltimore police say 5 of the 6 officers involved in Gray's arrest have provided statements to investigators, and a lawyer for them says any injuries sustained by Gray could not have come from the officers.
Our position is something happened in that van. We just don't know.
Juan, he only wants his first name used, grew up with Freddie Gray. He's his brother-in-law and says Freddie's older brother died in street violence here almost 2 years ago. Freddie Gray's family in disbelief.
Just because he was running down the street and this police decided he wanted to stop him. Now he a bad person. So someone deserved to be taken, not deserved for running down the street. You don't know he a bad person when he runs.
His leg broken, y'all dragging him like that.
Fiona, who also only wants to use her first name, shot this video. She says Freddie, a guy she knew as a joker and a ladies' man, only said one thing to her that day.
When I ran up the street and seen him, the first thing I asked him was he okay, because I heard him screaming, and he didn't never say yes or no. He just said I can't breathe, and this was yelling.
One thing consistent with every witness statement, this was the spot where Freddie was first arrested by police. And then inexplicably, they say, he was dragged to this spot right here. Witness also tells us that Freddie was on his back, handcuffed, his legs up behind his back, a knee of an officer firmly on his neck. Freddie Gray's cousin says she only hopes the violence stops. What do you hope the police will hear tonight?
I know, peace, just give it justice, just stop this.
Well, it's pretty important because it shows two things. First of all, it shows a totally different perspective than what we saw before that initial cell phone video. You can really get a sense of seeing the legs and the way that he was transported, and a different point along the journey here when they put those leg irons on. The other thing that it shows is that if you believe the timeline that the police gave, this is several minutes since he had actually been put into the police van. This is after he asked for an inhaler. This is after the police, the driver of that van, said that he was behaving in a way that was irate. And so they pulled over, they made this stop and put those leg irons on him. So I would think that a lot of people would be curious to see, is he in any worse shape than he was initially when you see that other cell phone video that was taken just several minutes prior? And, does it seem as if he's in the same condition? And many people say they believe it's the transport, but there are others who saw that initial video say something had to happen before he even got into that van. So I think the more video you see, the better. And clearly they're going to have to zoom in on that. And everybody is very curious.
I don't have the little tapes in the right order. The first tape is when the police arrest him for, theoretically, for running around with a knife. And he looks badly injured when they put him into the van. Then there's a lot of questions about what happened in the van, including whether they just drove the van in a way that caused him to be badly hurt. She's talking about second time when the van stops, but there is a first time when he's lifted into the van. You'll see it in a minute, and he looks in very bad shape. Thank you.
As to what they're going to learn about that.
Suzanne Melvo, thank you so much. In Baltimore, police officials there say the officers who've been suspended are all consistent with one detail. No use of force was used on this 25-year-old man.
No. No, absolutely not. None of the officers describe any use of force. None of the officers describe using any force against Mr. Gray.
That's police. Want you to hear from these two witnesses. The first didn't want to be identified. He shot this video of Gray's arrest. The other heard the initial encounter Gray had with police.
Had Freddie Gray been up into what I would like to call a pretzel type of move, where they had the heels of his feet to his back, and then he was still in handcuffs, and then they had the knee like in the back of his neck.
I heard the young man screaming, "Get off my neck, get off my neck, you're hurting my neck."
When we slow this video down, we've spotlighted it here just to try to get a better picture. These officers getting up from around Gray. It appears that Gray's leg does seem to be released from being bent backward. That seems to support the witness's description of Gray as being like a, quote, pretzel.
Were you there when Mr. Gray started running, or what did you first notice?
Well, I was actually in the bed asleep, and one of my relatives came running in the house screaming my name. They're tasing him, they're tasing him, they're tasing one of your friends. And then I run out the door to try to, see what's going on. But by the time I got to the actual site that it was happening, I didn't see the taser or the taser. He was putting it back in the holster rather than tasing him still. And so then I just whipped out my phone and started recording, man. And I was actually behind at first, but as you can see on the video, I had to run around the van to try to get a better angle. So that's what I did. But when I got there to the site, man, it was just terrible.
Were you looking through the camera, or were you sort of looking directly at it with your eyes, and the camera was also on?
Well, by the time I start recording them, they have him in like this. It's like a crab leg. The heel of his feet were almost on his back, and like he was already cuffed at the time. So, and then they had his knee. The police had their knee and his neck, and was like he was like crushing his neck really hard.
You're also recording as they begin to drag him to the van. To you, did it look like he was able to walk?
Well, to me, it didn't look like he was able to use his legs at all. They were totally limp. He had no use. I mean, they say that he was able to put pressure on one leg, but I'm pretty sure if you take away that help from the officers holding him up, that he wouldn't be able to stand on his own. It's no way possible. As you can see in the video, they drag him to the paddy wagon because he couldn't walk.
Now, police have said they actually didn't use the taser. Did you see any indication that they actually had used a taser? I know somebody told you that a taser had been used.
I heard the electricity, the noise from the taser. I never seen, him getting electrocuted or tased.
But you didn't see any wires connected to him when he was down, because that's not visible.
No.
Okay. Was there any possibility in your mind that he was choosing not to walk? Some people sometimes will, just let the police drag them.
I believe whatever they did, it happened right there. And it's not in my mind that he is in no way trying to resist or refuse to walk.
Was he saying something? Was he yelling something?
If
so, could you tell?
He was asking because he had asthma. He was asking for an inhaler. But of course, no one paid it any mind. So they, of course, just threw him in a paddy wagon and drove off. So we take off running to try to see what's going on. But by the time we get there, it's two more officers and the paddy wagon officer that's surrounding him with the bike guys. So we couldn't get a visual on Freddie at the time.
I talked to the mayor last night, and she says she hasn't heard any evidence that there was probable cause to arrest him at all. The police have said a police officer saw a clip that they believe was a knife on his front pocket. Turned out to be some sort of a spring-loaded knife or a switchblade. A, is that something you know that he carried? And B, do you believe that they actually saw that?
First of all, whatever they saying that he had, it wasn't worth his life. It wasn't. You didn't have to kill him. And I've never known Freddie to carry any type of weapon. Freddie is 110 pounds soaking wet, man. And I don't believe for 1 second that he would be aggressive towards the police in any type of way, because we know that police brutality is prevalent in our neighborhood. And we know that it goes on because we see it every day. So, no, I don't. I don't believe that them guys felt threatened in any type of way. And I believe that it was just overkill. They overdid it, and they don't want to admit it.
Well, listen, I appreciate you talking about what you saw. Thank you very much. And also,
early morning, April 12th, 2015. Baltimore man Freddie Gray is arrested after a police foot pursuit. Shown here on cell phone video, Gray is in handcuffs as police escort him into the back of a police van. The answer to what kills Gray lies in what happens next.
We found new information, and we will continue to find more information as we go.
At a news conference this week, Baltimore police announced the release of what they say are a series of surveillance cameras that show the incident's timeline. 8:39 a.m., Gray runs through a housing complex. Less than 2 minutes later, cameras capture a police van driving towards Gray. Lights flashing, a squad car follows. Just before 8:42 a.m., Gray is on the concrete, under arrest. 2 bicycle cops hover over him. Within seconds, residents casually begin to gather at the scene, some with cell phone cameras. By 8:44 a.m., the police van returns to frame. Its back doors open. Gray appears to be loaded into the back. At 8:46 a.m., the van drives off. A police union attorney told CNN what may have followed is a so-called rough ride, or a deliberate tactic used by police to harm unbelted, handcuffed passengers. Gray was not buckled in, though the police commissioner says he should have been. On its way to the police station, the van makes 3 stops. At 9:11 a.m., nearly 30 minutes after Gray's arrest, the police van is seen making one of those stops. Its back doors open as police pick up another prisoner. 15 minutes later, police call an ambulance for Gray when they arrive at a precinct. Nearly a week since his death, police have still not released a timeline or information about their last interaction with Gray.
We know more details about those 3 stops that police van made. According to police, during the first stop, Gray was placed in leg irons. During the second stop, they say they stopped to, quote, deal with Gray, though we don't know exactly what that means. That part is also under investigation. During the third stop, according to the police commissioner, Gray was seen on the floor of the van requesting a medic. Police say mistakes were made. They also say that their investigation is ongoing.
One second. All right, you said tinted windows, right? That's the reason why you stopped my vehicle?
Tinted windows.
All right, I'll have a tint permit from the state of PennDOT. That's what I'm going to show you first. That invalidates your traffic stop, sir. All right, what's your second reason?
Your headlights, sir.
My headlights, what? What's wrong with my headlights?
Your headlight is out.
Oh, no, it's not. Both my headlights are on.
But I can still see your paperwork.
Well, no, you can't. You'll see the tint permit and you'll see my identification, but you won't see the vehicle registration because your traffic stop is invalidated on my attorney.
No, once I see your paperwork, you don't tell me whether my stop is invalid or not.
I'm telling you right now, Officer Holloway. All right? Here's the, sir, you don't have the right to open my door. This car has video monitoring, just so you know.
Your video.
Okay, you don't have the right to open my door, so you're violating my constitutional right now.
Still out of here.
Sir, I don't have to step out the vehicle.
I'll see your video monitor.
For my safety and your safety, I'm going to sit in this vehicle and I'm requesting your supervisor now.
You can request a supervisor.
All right, let me give you my paperwork for the vehicle. Well, my tint permit and my identification. That's number one. State of Pennsylvania tent permit. I don't want to get it wet. You can read it. All right. It says I can present it to law enforcement. That's number one. All right. Vehicle registration. I will not be.
Let me see.
You can't put that out in the ring. If you want to hold it right here, you can hold it right here.
I'm not stepping into your car from my own.
You don't have to, but I'm going to stand right here.
Read it.
Well, sir, I'm not passing it to you outside this vehicle. It's raining outside. I don't want my paperwork. It's not a problem. Well, then what I'll do is I can call for your supervisor.
That's totally fine.
It's not a problem. Sounds good. All right. Time is 7:25 p.m. Officer is trying to pull me out my vehicle, Holloway. All right. Invalidated his traffic stop. Says he's stopping me for tinted windows, in which this is a tent permit from the state of Pennsylvania.
That's all I it's nothing.
Tent permit from the state of Pennsylvania.
Huh?
It's number one. Can I reach for my license, sir?
Yes, he's refusing to give me his paperwork.
Can I reach for my license?
You can reach for your license.
Thank you. All right. Here is my driver's license. This is number one. All right. Fire marshal identification. That's number two. And badge to go with it. All right. And I'm requesting a supervisor. Can you call for your supervisor, sir?
Yes, I did, sir.
Thank you.
I'm trying to do my job.
Can you shut my door, please? Oh, yeah, that's accurate, too. That's who I work for, just so you know.
That's fine.
We're going to stop all this nonsense with you guys down here just stopping people and doing whatever you want. So that's done. Days are over.
I'm glad you think you're changing the world.
No, sir. Ashley, let me explain something to you. I'm not changing the world, okay? I'm professional, and we're going to change it one person at a time. I'm going to roll my back window up because you're getting inside of my vehicle wet, and I have speakers. You're damaging my speakers by the rain.
No, he's refusing to come out of the vehicle.
So can you please?
What's that?
Could you please?
No, it's yeah. Where's your driver's license?
My driver's license?
Yes.
No problem. There you go. Could you shut my door, please?
In a second, I'm trying to see if you're.
All right, I'm requesting so he can shut my door. My door is I got speakers, aftermarket speakers on my door, in which they're being damaged. He has my door wide open, so you see. So when I file a complaint, you know, my speaker's being damaged, you guys will be able to see it. So what are you looking for?
I'm trying to see if your high beams was on, because I know when you made that turn that your one light was up.
Alright, shut my door at 7:28. I'm gonna roll that back window up, okay?
Turn your high beam on now.
You said my high beams?
Your high beams.
Okay. Go ahead. Alright, not a problem. Second suggestion is that my vehicle headlights, one of my headlights was off. Sound like similar to the Brandon Tate Brown issue, you know, but both my headlights are functioning properly. Requested a supervisor at 7:28 and refused to give him the paperwork to the vehicle because the state of Pennsylvania, for the reason why he's stopping me, invalidates his traffic stop for stopping the vehicle just for the sole purposes of sunscreening, in which PennDOT, I have a PennDOT exemption.
I have for that today. You can stop it for the sole purpose of vehicle 104520.
Oh, you can stop.
I don't know if I got this last guy in there, but that was a very interesting clip. All right, Professor Steiker.
I've never been called on for like 30 years. Yes.
You're going to get called on today.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're looking at the prosecutor, State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, and the question is whether she has overcharged, charged too quickly, misbehaved in any of the number of ways, including one that we'll see is quite sympathetic, trying to stop a riot, which she did. She stopped riots. But what's the law supposed to be for a prosecutor deciding to charge for a series of homicides, kidnapping, false arrest, those are the charges that the 6 policemen are charged with. What extent of proof, what's the burden of proof she should have in terms of evidence if she brings those charges?
Well, I mean, there's the legal burden of proof, and there's the ethical burden of proof. So the legal burden of proof is probable cause, is the standard for making a charge. The ethical burden of proof is prosecutors should charge only when they believe they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, and that they could, make the case at trial. What's interesting is that had this been, for example, reversed and a police officer had been killed by a civilian, it's very likely that charges would have followed. No one would be saying, boy, this is really fast to charge someone for that crime. But charges against police officers tend to go more slowly, partly because many jurisdictions have rules that police officers don't even have to file reports for an extended period of time when they've discharged their weapons or used force against other kinds of force against civilians. So I do think there's a little bit of a double standard here in terms of people being astounded at how fast these charges are against the police versus how fast charges follow when individuals commit crimes against one another or against the police. That said, there are strategic reasons to go either way. You raised the strategic reason of trying to forestall rioting, but there's also a worry that if the charges eventually don't stick, that could be really problematic too. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, that if you file too soon, that could be seen as hasty if later on the charges fall apart or are downgraded, but filing quickly here had public safety implications in terms of quieting a very tense situation on the streets.
It had the effect of very quickly quieting Baltimore down.
Right? Changing rioting to celebration. It's pretty astounding how quickly that worked. So it's a complicated strategic situation. The legal situation is clear, but how this actually plays out on the ground, and we should ask some of our prosecutors here, because our single prosecutor.
I was waiting for that.
We now have Professor Randy Kennedy with us too. Alex Whiting is our only prosecutor. Alex.
Former prosecutor. So I actually.
Like the odds up there, do you?
Yeah, no, it's okay. Used to it. So I agree with what Professor Steiker says. I think that I think it's right that there's the legal standard, there's the ethical standard. And it's true that there is a feel of a double standard. However, it has to be remembered that police are authorized to use force. So the question is whether the force that they've used is lawful or not. And so those cases can be more complicated than a non-police case where there's no question that the use of force is illegal. So there can be reasons why the case is more complicated when it involves a police officer. I think that honestly, we're speculating. We don't know what the evidence is. There's apparently a very thorough investigation that was done to collect witness statements, to collect video, audio transmissions, and so forth and so forth. None of that's been made available, so we don't know. So we're just kind of speculating here. I do think that I do have some anxiety about the speed in terms of what kind of investigation, what kind of case that she's been able to put together in that short period of time. In police cases, the prosecutors and investigators have an advantage leading up to an indictment, up until the charges are filed, because nobody knows what the case is going to look like, and so they have a strategic advantage when they're gathering evidence, and they can use the grand jury to bring witnesses in, to lock in witnesses, to try to get some of the police officers to cooperate, to collect pattern evidence. And so strategically, police cases are normally done very methodically, very slowly, and by the time the indictment happens, all the witnesses have been locked in, and the case is sort of set. And there's powerful reasons to do that. Once the indictment happens, everybody knows you've shown your hand, you've revealed your hand, and then you lose the strategic advantage, and it becomes harder to get witnesses to cooperate. It may be harder to get information. So she has potentially given up that strategic advantage, and maybe for the reasons that the urgency of the circumstances required her to move quickly.
What's the privilege that a policeman has that might be involved here? In other words, what right does a policeman have to do what if you did to somebody in the front row would be an assault, kidnapping, an arrest, a false arrest, all those things? Here, let me answer my own question. Most of the cases have been self-defense. Most of the cases have been self-defense. Ferguson is a claim of self-defense. This is a policeman's privilege to use force to make an arrest, but that's limited, right, Ron?
Yeah, it's limited according to the circumstances. Police departments have what they call a force continuum. And it's discretionary with respect to the officer, what part of the continuum they use, that is the amount of force they use, but it's affirmatively limited by the law. You can only use the amount of force necessary to affect the arrest. Over and above that is unlawful.
And lethal force, the Supreme Court has held, would be unlawful unless the person was shown to be extremely dangerous. Right,
that you're reasonably in fear of your own life or the life of others.
Could I just say something going back to Carol's about the asymmetry? One of the things that struck me about this was a law. I didn't know anything about this Policeman's Bill of Rights, that Maryland has this bill, this law that says that when a policeman's charged, he has 10 days grace period. He doesn't have to cooperate with an investigation. Apparently, there are a number of other states that have such laws. I mean, one of the things that's happened in the last 6 months with all of this attention on the police is the extraordinary degree to which the police insulate themselves either through a law like this or through their police unions. And I think the effect of police unions, too, in this whole prosecution is a thing that has really come to the fore. I know oftentimes among progressives, and I count myself as a progressive, there's this notion of, solidarity with police. You never, cross a police picket line. Unions are good. From what I can tell, police unions are a baleful, terrible influence. And in this prosecution thus far, I mean, as soon as the first thing out of the mouth of the police union was an unequivocal defense of these officers, it seemed like no matter what they had done. So, two things. One, what do we think about these laws? I don't know much about them. I'd like to know more about them. And two, what do we think about the police unions? Should there be more, restriction on the police unions?
Professor Crespo?
So I don't know much about the Maryland Bill of Rights law. I agree that the dynamic is somewhat troubling of the police unions, not just in this case, but in the series that we've seen now. I think it is actually kind of interesting, I hadn't noticed this before this clip, that the police union, according to the quote attributed by the CNN moderator, though, did acknowledge the existence of these rough rides, which I think is actually a fairly significant concession in this case, because as I understand these charges, I agree with Professor Whiting, we don't know a lot, we're speculating a lot about facts, but you could imagine two key moments in this case, one being the arrest before he's in the van, and this idea of a knee on the person's neck vertebrae, given that I understand he died from essentially spinal injury near his neck. But as I understand the charges, the most serious charges are to the driver of the van. It's the driver of the van who's charged with second-degree depraved heart, I believe is the Maryland language, which suggests that whatever the prosecutor does know that we don't, they think that what was the more significant injury and more wrongful conduct here was this rough ride, as opposed to use of force in the sort of constitutional tort kind of way, excessive force in effectuating an arrest. It's essentially my understanding from what I've read in the press about the depraved heart thing is they're charging the driver of being dramatically and severely reckless, and perhaps in not following the regulations that the department had about not doing these rough rides or about securing people in their vans.
You want to remind us a little bit about what the reckless standard is here for second-degree murder, what they call, Maryland has a different name for it, but it's what we call second-degree murder.
Maryland, when it codified its homicide laws, it codified the common law. So for those of little review for 1Ls, the common law of murder is that sometimes non-intentional murder, so no one's saying anyone intended to kill Freddie Gray. None of these charges say that. But it can still be a murder even if the perpetrator did not intend it, if the actor acts with a kind of recklessness that's greater than the recklessness necessary for ordinary reckless manslaughter. So we know that recklessness is conscious awareness of a high risk of death for the purposes of homicide. So depraved heart recklessness is recklessness plus what? Plus greater risk, greater awareness, and greater, this is the common law, depravity, a heart regardless of social duty. So we talk about someone acting from bad motives. So there's this sense that this may be a case in which what the prosecutors suspect is that the driver intended to harm Freddie Gray, not to kill him, but intended to harm him, knowing that they were running a serious risk of death.
I just want to put in two things and then go to you, Alex, because I'm calling you. I do think Professor Kennedy has a very strong point. Police unions are a big problem here. I asked a former, very much admired police commissioner for Boston, Paul Evans, why people weren't using tasers. Why were they shooting at people? This is earlier cases. He said, well, I bought them all tasers, but they won't use them. I said, you're the commissioner. Tell them they have to use tasers. He says, the union won't allow me to do that. I said, well, why aren't they wearing body armor so that they can wait longer and worry less about being shot? Same answer. He said he fired, I asked him, are policemen often just more or less vicious out there, ready to kill black people? He said, no, it's quite rare, but there are such people in police departments. He said he tried to fire one, and the union brought a case for whatever the impeachment of the commissioner is. Unions, Randy's got it right, unions are a big problem. Now, Alex, if you remember your question or comment, I'd like to ask, why isn't this res ipsa loquitur? He was healthy, he was arrested, he was twisted into the shape of a pretzel, he was dragged into a police car, he was dead or nearly dead when he came out of it, a paddy wagon.
Yeah, so
what are we worried? I mean, who didn't? He didn't do it.
So to echo Professor Crespo's comment, the allegation is that the prosecutor made is that the death occurred not as a result of the arrest that we saw, but rather between stop 1 and stop 2 during the ride. And so that's when the critical, that's what the prosecutor has alleged. The prosecutor,
it's one of the possibilities.
Well, that's what the prosecutor who has all the available evidence has alleged. Right? That it's not based on the arrest, but it's based on the ride. And that, in a way, the thing as a prosecutor in this case, that's a big plus, because when you're doing police cases, the things you look for are, number one, was the victim restrained at the time? If the victim's not restrained, it's always a much harder case, right, in terms of the use of force. Victim's restrained, and then it gets close to res ipsa, like you say. You can't use force. It's very limited circumstances when you can use force against a restrained victim. You look for video, you look for pattern, and lastly, and importantly, you look for cooperation of police officers. You look for police officer witnesses. And I'd be interested to know if any, obviously I assume the 6 who've been charged haven't cooperated. I'm interested to know if other officers have provided information who are on the scene, who were there. That would be really important to building this case. But I think the fact that the injury occurred while he was restrained, that's a powerful piece for the prosecution.
And just to add in terms of the facts that we think we might know, my understanding from the timeline is that there was a civilian witness in that they stopped at stop 1 to pick someone else up. So my sense is that there is a person who's not a police officer who is very much in proximity to what's happening. The last thing on the sort of res ipsa kind of comment, my understanding is that Maryland has something akin to the sort of misdemeanor manslaughter rule, which is like felony murder, except if it's a misdemeanor instead of a felony, it works as manslaughter instead of murder. And I think that is the theory they're going for on their manslaughter charge, which again, you don't need to be saying that these officers tried to kill this person. There's multiple different theories baked into how the initial charges have come out that suggest that they're not going that way. And then also just to point out, my sense is that they are pursuing an indictment, that this is their complaint stage, basically.
They may not, I don't know whether Maryland requires an indictment. Half the states require an indictment, half do not. Grand jury.
Mm-hmm. It's either an indictment or...
But they can't pursue an indictment after they've charged them.
They either have to have an indictment or a preliminary hearing. States have to go one route or the other. So there will be some testing of these charges. I think the challenge for these charges is going to be the recklessness. This is where misdemeanor manslaughter comes in, as Professor Crespo suggests, because, I think the defense is going to be, so we were roughing him up, but we didn't think he was going to die. We weren't aware of that. And for either depraved heart murder or even ordinary manslaughter, you have to show conscious awareness of the risk of death. So that's going to be where the defense comes. This is where it's a common law idea of misdemeanor manslaughter. If you commit a misdemeanor and somebody dies as a result of that automatically ups it to reckless involuntary manslaughter.
I see only 2 moments when he could have been killed, as far as we can tell. From the tapes. One, when they were arresting him, he does look like he's half dead or 3/4 dead when they put him in the machine, into the automobile, the paddy wagon. And there, you do have him screaming, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And somebody's got his knee on the guy's neck. The other time is in the paddy wagon when he's not when he's not restrained, and they could be taking him for a very rough ride, hoping to bang him up in the back of the paddy wagon. You'd like very much to know, and this they could probably find out, whether there was any tradition of that going on, any practice of that going on in Baltimore.
There were 2 cases before. I read a press report. There have been 2 settlements in the last 4 years with this rough ride business. There are 2 other people who've been paralyzed.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I think the state's chances are getting stronger.
I mean, I think they have a strong case. The point I'd want to interject is that facts nowhere near as strong as these have been the basis for complaints and convictions for black young men for years and years and years and years. So when I hear the outrage on the media about how quickly this occurred, my response is, now you see how it feels to be a young black man in an urban city. This is what happens. So, so I always have conflicting views on this. I would love for prosecutors to take their time and investigate cases fully, but do it for everybody, right? Do it for everybody. So what's happening now is people who are not traditionally subject to the criminal justice system are being treated like everyone else. So people have 2 ways. They say, well, let's just treat everybody equally badly. But my view is let's raise the level of process for everybody. The public is now seeing, well, is this how our criminal justice system works? Something seems disquieting about this. Well, I tell you what, that's how just generations of Baltimore, mainly young black men, have experienced the criminal justice system. So if we want to talk reform, let's talk reform for all citizens.
Is there any argument for treating police better than other citizens in this type of situation? Let's say a reckless homicide?
Better? No. You know, no, everyone is equal under the law.
Did you really say better?
If there are, you said better. if there are certain, you know, if there's some positive law in Maryland, I don't know all of Maryland law that says that there are. I don't know this Bill of Rights. I mean, you have to follow the law. But, you know, if equal protection means equal protection, then everyone should be treated equally with respect to how the criminal law works.
I think that's right, too. And I think that's one of the big issues here. I've been reading everything that's written about it. One of the big issues is the one you say. Basically, that young black men have been quickly charged, quickly prosecuted, quickly convicted, and nobody's been complaining about that.
It actually reminds me, in just 2 seconds, I don't want to hog the mic, but a very bastardized phrase that's now sort of in the public now, and it's Bill Clinton was the first black president. People have heard that. What that statement actually derived from was a statement where at Princeton, Toni Morrison said in the middle of Whitewater and all this, he, for the first time, is seeing the ways in which the criminal justice system can really bear down on people in unfair ways. He is experiencing what it's like to be a black man in America. You know, that was the origin of the comment. And so I think in many of these cases now, the country is seeing what it feels like to be a black man in America. So you want to talk about rush to judgment? You know, I can give you concrete examples of rush to judgment for years and across jurisdictions. And it's right. You know, there has been a rush to judgment. So let's, if we're going to fix it, let's fix it for everybody.
Can I just say one quick thing to sort of underscore this point is that, at least in my experience doing this in DC, not that far from Maryland, even the delay here is more of a delay than the standard at the charging stage of the complaint stage. My experience, almost all cases, the question for the charging stage was identity. Do we know who the people are who were involved in a death that we think was not a natural death? And we'll figure out self-defense later, we'll figure out recklessness later. Who is the person? And that was the vast majority of the time enough that a charge was filed, and then perhaps over the next couple weeks as the investigation came together, the charge would be revisited. But usually, if the investigation turned things up that undermined that first charge within 24, 48 hours of the event, that was fodder for plea negotiations, not for saying, oh, we shouldn't have filed that charge so quickly. It's just meant now you'll get a better deal. Of course, with police officers where the acquittal rates are so high, the plea negotiating dynamic is very different than in the real criminal justice system that Professor Sullivan has described.
And I think people are shocked. I know law students are shocked when they see what probable cause really means. I mean, I stole a technique from my Crim Pro professor when I took it here and use it in my class where I give people probable cause documents. When we're talking about Gerstein and so forth and say, is this probable cause? And these are real cases I just brought with me from DC, and people are shocked. They're like, you know, wow, this is enough for people to be held detainedly? Absolutely, plenty.
Should this, I want to ask just two questions and then we better open it up very quickly. Should she have taken anybody, should State Attorney Marilyn Mosley have taken account of the fact that there were riots going on? Professor Dershowitz and others have written saying, no, you shouldn't pay any attention to that at all. Assume that she knew, as I assume she did know, that this would be a major step in saving lives and ending riot and saving Baltimore. Would that justify an arrest that you would not, a charge that you would not otherwise have made so quickly? Should she have considered the impact of her decision to quickly charge on the safety of Baltimore and its people? How many think she should have? How many think she shouldn't have? A little bit of a balance, but more think she should have. How many think she had enough evidence from what we've seen and heard? We don't know what statements she's gotten from any of the police officers, but otherwise we probably know everything that has been said by neighbors, and we know everything that's on camera. We have and we know, by the way, that I don't know what it's worth, but the coroner has ruled that Gray died in the van by his head being thrown against some kind of hook. It was not by thrown, I just mean in the course of the driving of the van against the hook that was in there, because the coroner says that his skull was dented in the same shape as the hook. Okay. How many think that she has enough evidence to bring the case now? How many would have waited? I'm not going to say that she doesn't have it, but how many would have waited for longer to see what, if anything, turned up that might discourage you from bringing charges? How many would have waited longer? All right. How many would like to ask a question? Yes.
So on kind of what Professor Sullivan was speaking about, I think that it seems clear that like the law might not be the fix to this problem, given like the extraordinary uphill battle that we're seeing even in Baltimore and will continue to see with what seems to be very clear and recorded and egregious set of facts. So as kind of practitioners, but also as kind of public intellectuals and legal educators, like how do you think about your responsibility to broaden the conversation past the kind of the minutia of the law to the reality that the law doesn't tend to be responsive to the rights violations of certain communities? And how do you see your role in like using what seems like a moment to actually forward the true everyday rights for a lot of young, poor Black kids in America?
So, you know, it's kind of what I spend my career doing. It's sort of one of my main focuses. But I actually think both are important. The minutia of the law, as you put it, I think that citizens should understand the law. I heard people on, significant networks, CNN, talk about depraved heart murder in the old, 19th century way, intentional, malignant heart before we understood those terms to be, varying and intentional states. So one, I think people do not understand the law, do not understand the system. I think we can play a role in educating the public, what constitutes probable cause, what is a complaint versus an indictment. There's a troubling lack of civic education generally. But to the second piece of your question, in terms of improving the life chances of young African American men, there are all sorts of ways that people can do it. Andrew, Carol, and I started our careers actually, representing people and holding the government to its proof. That's one. There are policy, right, interventions. There are voting. My biggest advice in Ferguson was for people to go vote and vote in new prosecutors and so forth. You can kind of see the difference in the prosecutor in Ferguson and the prosecutor in Detroit, right, in terms of how they reacted to police-involved homicides, right? And it's so it's an elected office. So there are just a range of ways to help out, and students too. Writing, editorials, commentaries, and so forth. There are a range of ways that people can engage this issue.
Can I on the issue of what is to be done? I'd like to underline your point about the importance of prosecutors, because over the years, people here, students I've interacted with, we're talking about careers in the administration of criminal justice. There's a lot of attractiveness about being a public defender, and Lord knows we need excellent public defenders, and we've seen excellent public defenders and heard from excellent public defenders. But the most important person, I think, the most powerful person in the courtroom, in the criminal justice system, is the prosecutor. And we need we need enlightened, progressive people to be prosecutors. And I've encountered students who, when they're thinking about careers, will say things like, oh no, I'd never want to be a prosecutor because, I don't want to do the work for the man. And it always struck me as a very self-defeating attitude to take. Why cede this very important position to people who might not be as enlightened as you are? So we need public defenders, but we also need prosecutors because, just like you said, you can see the difference that can, on a very practical level, that can be made between a prosecutor who is actually striking, who's going to work for the people as a whole, versus prosecutors who have a more partial and I would say bad point of view.
I taught, of course, a reading group during the spring with Professor Ogletree. Professor Ogletree brought in a young black prosecutor in juvenile court who's dressed like a street kid, looked very young. This guy stunned the class and impressed the class very much by making the point that Professor Kennedy has just made. He said, look, if a kid's in trouble, I can do so much more good for him than I could as a defense attorney. As a defense attorney, I would plea bargain and get something, but I can decide not to prosecute, tell him he has to go into school, tell him he has to be in by 8 o'clock. I can make a whole difference in his life. Very similar point.
Can I just jump in here? I don't disagree with what either Professor Kennedy or you are saying, but I want to emphasize something that cuts a little bit against that, a note of caution, which is the power of culture, of offices and roles, and how much that shapes what people can and cannot achieve. So just to raise one uncomfortable fact about the Freddie Gray case is 3 of the charged officers, including the driver of the van, were themselves black, which suggests that the culture of policing plays a role in shaping people's attitudes about their job and their roles, even in communities where you'd expect that they'd have some more sensitivity to that. So being blue as well as black shapes one in significant ways, and being a prosecutor shapes one in significant ways. Being a defense attorney shapes one in significant ways. It's hard to believe, and I didn't believe it when I was a student, about how much one is shaped by the professional role that one takes on, but 30 years on, I can really tell you, you bring yourself to the role, but the role imprints itself on you, and that's something to be really aware of.
I agree, but were you suggesting that blackness is a natural thing that conditions people towards compassion, etc.?
No. But many people, Randy, in the 1960s, James Baldwin wrote about police in Harlem and said they were like an occupying force because the New York Police Department in the 1960s was all white, pretty much. And many people thought then and proposed that integrating police departments was the answer to police violence against poor black communities. And unfortunately, what we're seeing today is there may be very good reasons to do it, but it is not itself the answer. So I'm not suggesting anything essential about being black and one's attitudes, but just for decades, people said, we just got to integrate the police departments and we'll solve this problem. Well, to a large degree, we have, in many places, including Baltimore, integrated police departments, and we have not solved this problem. So it's just to raise the question. I was just using it as a way of talking about culture, about the police unions, about the ways in which playing a particular role can really shape people. And it can limit, I have to say, what some prosecutors can do. So, I had, I won't mention this name, but one of my very early students was just, totally concerned about mass incarceration and all this kind of thing, went on to become a prosecutor and kept in touch with the student over the years, and this student became a big proponent of the war on drugs because saving, poor minority communities from the scourge of drugs. And it was just funny, not funny, just interesting to see how one's views about these things are just shaped by the role. And, you know, I saw in this student like a 180-degree turn in kind of, you know, a worldview. Now, who's to say which worldview is right? But I'm imagining that there was some causation about where this student found herself as a professional and the change of views. So I'm just saying, I want to just raise that because it's hard to believe that your views will change because of where you are, but they will, but maybe they will less if you really are conscious of that.
And just a quick supplement to what Carol said, and I agree. There are also formal constraints in these offices. The top person says, we will prosecute all gun cases, period. And they take away the discretion from the line prosecutor, which again goes, I think, back to Randy's point, that we have to vote in people with more progressive ideas about policing and law enforcement and prosecuting at the top, at the high levels, because oftentimes your hands are tied as a line attorney.
I'm sorry, I don't think I was clear about my question. I kind of meant more levying your influence. So for example, like there have been 2 open letters since I've been here that have been published in the Boston Globe. One about our own sexual harassment and assault policy, one in support of Alan Dershowitz. And that was kind of an example of professors levying their own influence and power to kind of validate and progress certain causes. Have you guys thought at all about how you could do that with this issue?
I don't know about collectively. I mean, I've written to a lot of folks when they haven't published anything, but when this has gone out, no, I'm serious. You know, it's one of those things. Perhaps it was too strident. I don't know, but yeah, that's certainly one angle. I mean, but there are a lot of things that you don't see that are behind the scenes. I spoke with this Professor Robb this morning about a local group in Baltimore. Whom she asked me to join her in working with a youth empowerment group. I mean, these are things that are not, you know, visible as such. You know, we worked, and my students and I worked with the Ferguson folks. We actually did an initial draft of the civil complaint for Michael Brown for his attorneys down there. I mean, these are things that aren't public in the way that you're suggesting, but they are substantive and real, and I think make an impact.
How many of you think that the times are changing dramatically in these terms, in terms of police minority community relationships? Not too many. I've never seen a time quite like it. They may not change, but I've never seen a time when the police were under as much pressure as they're under now.
Professor, can I say something? It struck me. I'm from Baltimore, East Baltimore, from the project. So this all touches me very, very well. And so one of the things that got me with the Marilyn Mosley thing is people talk about her as a progressive. But if you look at her Twitter timeline, her website, she prides herself on putting young black men in jail every day. You go into in a certain courtroom in Baltimore City, her prosecutors, her department prides themselves on putting young black men in prison all the time. In fact, although there's this kind of this false, I guess it's a hope that some people are saying that she's a progressive prosecutor. She would not have won that office. She would not have been ran without having a tough on-crime agenda in a city like Baltimore. And so a lot of times we say that prosecutors have to have these progressive ways, and that you can have hope in the system. But I don't see somebody in Baltimore who really, or in a city like Baltimore, who would win a top prosecutor job, a state's attorney job, without saying that they were going to put murderers in prison, without saying they were going to put drug dealers in prison.
Shouldn't somebody put murderers in prison?
I don't know.
You don't? Well, I don't understand how you can say, I don't see how you can take the position, shouldn't a murderer be put in prison? Okay. It's a very simple question.
I don't think they should all be put in prison.
But it cuts, like, I mean, what we've been saying is that Marilyn Mosley has been setting exorbitant bail amounts I mean, without answering the question of should a murderer be put in prison, which many people in this room will have different answers to, the fact remains that she's been setting exorbitant bails for like very low crimes, which I think everybody in this room would agree is
like any other prosecutor in the country. She's not that different.
I heard, I'll just be straight.
I would like to see evidence, which I doubt, that the prosecutor you're talking about says that she likes putting black young men in prison. Is it that she says that? Hold it. Is it that she says that? Or is it that she says that poor black communities are menaced by crime and need to be protected? Those are two very different things, and it's important for us to get straight on which is which.
Okay, my most important thing is her words are less important than her actions. What she does on a day-to-day basis, what her office does on a day-to-day basis, are more important and are more, I guess, substantively important to the people who live in those communities than what she says at a press conference and the charge that she brings against police officers, who I agree deserve due process, and who I agree deserve to be treated like any other citizen. But I think that we should all not let these charges cloud our judgment.
I mean, same thing. I think it's a political question. Same thing I said to the folks in Ferguson. If you don't like what your prosecutor is doing, then vote someone else in office. I don't know the details. My first exposure to the man in Baltimore was seeing the 35-year-old woman at the microphone. But you know, it's a fair question. If you want a prosecutor who has a better view on, as Rebecca says, on setting bails and that sort of thing, then put someone up to run on that basis. You know, to Randy's point, I don't think you win on. I'm not going to put murderers in jail. That's
all right. Pastor Quinier gets the last comment,
which is, I think it's a mistake to focus simply on the police or on the district attorney or on what's happening in a particular community without thinking about structural questions in terms of where people live, whether people have work, whether they have gone to school. These are bigger issues that have to be addressed in my view. What we're seeing is the absence of all of that, and as a result, people are struggling to make a living. They don't have a future that they are focused on, and so what we're observing is just, in some ways, I hate to say it, but in some ways it's just a footnote of a much larger set of problems in terms of the allocation of opportunity, of education, of getting a good job where you're going to be able to be a good parent, to be a good citizen. So, I mean, I think what you're saying is important, but I think it has to be connected to the political process, to the way in which we allocate economic opportunities, education. I mean, this is just a nail in a much larger coffin that I think we need to start to address.
I agree.
Phil, could I just say one thing? I completely agree with what Lonnie just said, but I just want to say how impressed I am that all of you came out today. I know it's exam period and paper period and everyone's trying to get out of town. This is really impressive that this room is full to the bursting with all of you, and I commend you for your willingness to come and talk about this today. Good for you. Thank you for coming.